Welcome back, fight fans. We're back again. And it's episode, I think, 40 now. Whoa, crazy stuff. Anyway, so of course, this week we're going to be going through last week's stuff. That's UFC Vegas 54. And we've got, from yesterday, we've got the Ultimate Fighter episode 3 we're going to talk about. And then we're going to be talking about this week's fights, UFC Vegas 55, another huge number. And that'll be with Holly Holm and Katlyn Vieira. So let's get it started. We'll go through last week's event right from the start, right from the prelims. Whoopsie daisy, got the wrong thing here. There we go. I got the wrong notes up. We're good now. Okay, so we'll start with the opening one. It opened with what was supposed to be a huge favorite, Nick Maximov, getting some kind of performance here. Instead, we saw a fairly decent upset with Andre Petroski beating Nick Maximov in the very first round by submission, which is even crazier because we all know Maximov very much a ground specialist thanks to his work with Nick and Nate Diaz. But anyway, so Petroski got his offense going early, got a couple of heavy strikes in. We knew that was going to happen. I think most of us kind of thought that's what Petroski was going to be trying to do here with his stand-up, of course. From there, it looked like Maximov was just going to get his ground game going, but amazingly, the biggest underdog of the night, that's right, the biggest underdog, Petroski, was the one who dragged the wrestler Maximov down, grabbed his neck, and from there only took a couple of seconds. That was it, and Maximov went out fully asleep, completely limp, lying on the ground there from a first round anaconda choke from Andre Petroski. Amazing, which ended up getting him actually my bonus of the night, my blue bonus for submission of the night. Of course, I mean, huge underdog getting a submission over a wrestler when nobody expected that at all. And it was an anaconda choke, and he put him to sleep. Had to give him the bonus. After that, we had this fight was supposed to happen a couple weeks ago. Instead, it happened on Saturday. We saw two guys making their UFC debut. Tatsuro Taira from Japan, or Taira, I should say. I think that's what they kept saying. And Carlos Candelario. As I said, this was supposed to be happening a couple weeks ago. Very much in favor on the odds of Tatsuro Taira. And I even mentioned that actually last week on the stream because I mentioned it as a parlay opportunity. I hope everybody included him in the parlays because he got it going pretty well. Candelario did make the first move, pushed Taira along the fence, got some control time going, but he got out of it pretty quick and got his own clinch going. As the round went on, that's when Taira started to get things going a little bit more. His skill and his power was way more obvious. Landed a couple of heavy strikes. Closing out the round, both of them grabbed a little more control time. Really made it difficult for the judges, honestly. I would have said that Taira probably grabbed the round thanks to the extra strikes and the skills along the fence, but it was close. It was close. The second round opened up with some huge strikes from Taira, dropping Candelario to the ground, took his back, and using that dominant position, Tatsuro landed some wicked looking ground and pound, fought for some deep submission attempts. After having Taira on his back for almost 3 minutes, Candelario finally got him off and ended the round on top. You know, that's impressive, but I mean, a pretty clear round for Taira there. I mean, when you spend most of the round on top and land all that kind of thing, I would have said landed him up 2-0 up that, 2-0 after that. That's really distracting with all the clinking and bullshit from my dog, but you know, He always does that, so we'll move on. Knowing he was down on the cards, of course, Carlos fought to drag Taira to the ground, put him in a deep guillotine attempt. It took him a lot of flailing and flipping around, but Taira ended up getting out of it and ended up on top actually once again. From there, it was actually Taira who started getting his submission attempts going again. Carlos did get out of it, but found himself in some more attempts and also a bunch of ground and pound to finish the fight. Overall, pretty impressive, obviously, from Tatsuro Taira. I would say, from my memory anyway, probably the best looking candidate from Japan right now. I can't even really think of any other ones that are even somewhat promising right now. I don't know why, because like for so many years there were so many Japanese fighters. Then there weren't really any. I couldn't really tell you any, and then now we're starting to get maybe a couple more people with Tatsuro seemingly leading his way in that group. So, yeah, hopefully some good things for Japan. We always love to see more countries get involved, especially considering, like I said, Japan was so big into MMA and the UFC for so long. It's so weird that they didn't have anybody to really for so long. But yeah, hopefully the young, I think he's 22, maybe 23. So, I mean, to see somebody like that up and coming, especially in an exciting division like that, it's going to be great to see what he does here soon. But yeah, easy decision win for Tatsuro there, 30-27, 30-27, and actually a 30-26 on the cards there. Don't think I would have given him a 10-8 round in there anywhere, but you know, 30-27 all around even. That's, yeah, pretty fair. Pretty good win. After that, we saw Jandiroba and Angela Hill. I had Hill going into this, and honestly, as soon as I saw them get into the cage there and they started up, I immediately regretted my decision. I never really have that, and I can confidently say most of the time I'd go back and make the same picks as I did. I just don't tend to regret my decisions because of all the research that I put into it. You know, usually when I lose, something weird happens, or, you know, it's something unpredictable that you can't really see coming, or the judges would just end up fucking me. But in this case, honestly, as soon as I started seeing them fight, I was like, oh, this was just a horrible, this was a bad choice. Jandiroba just definitely seemed bigger. And when she's that good at grappling, it just seemed kind of inevitable that it was going to end with Hill getting smothered on the ground. Jandiroba made the first move of the fight, grabbed Hill, pushed her along the fence. From there, she rolled, put Hill in a nasty looking spot in a knee bar and an ankle lock for a bit there. It was looking pretty bad, but Angela did twist out of it. Got back to her feet, and Hill did start to get things going early in the second round, got some good combos, even got some clinch work along the fence, but then shifted right away with Jandiroba taking her down again. It was pretty tough going, I will say. Hill made it tough, but she did manage to get Hill down to the ground once again. The final round opened up with some big strikes from Hill. Stumbled Virna right there for the first time in the fight, but that was short-lived. Jandiroba found herself on top once again, smothered her with the wrestling. I mean, you know, Hill put up a decent fight. She had maybe a couple of chances here and there, but I mean, it was all the wrestling from Jandiroba, really not giving Hill much of a chance. A pretty decisive decision win there for Jandiroba. And again, more bullshit from my dog being an absolute moron in the background. Really, the only thing that we learned is that Jandiroba really needs to be taken more seriously here. I mean, she completely dominated Hill. And Hill, I mean, you know, you can't forget, Hill is pretty good. She is still good. Her stand-up is good. But the wrestling defense, especially against somebody this good, oh my God, fucking shit, Loki. Loki, you gotta stop. It's too loud. It's too loud. You're being insane. Stop. You know, it's just too much for Hill to handle. She can't handle that, especially when Jandiroba is bigger like that. It's not a good combination. What was I gonna say? And she still hasn't beaten anybody. Oh, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, she completely dominated Hill with her wrestling. But yeah, anyway. But the one thing for Jandiroba is she hasn't actually beaten anybody that's that good on the ground. She's been doing well against strikers because of her wrestling, but then she hasn't beaten anybody that's that next level on the ground. You know, because we've seen her lose to Dern and Ribas, who we will talk about later, of course, with her matchup with Chookagian. But yeah, she hasn't done necessarily well against that. There's like a level there, you know, there's levels to this, as they say. You know, there's Dern and Ribas up there. Then there's, you know, Jandiroba, and then there's a lot of the strikers that are kind of a little bit lower than that. So Jandiroba seems to do well against the strikers, but not so well against anybody else. But that does tell me, though, that since she did do so well against Hill, she would have a great chance, I would say, against any striker really in the division above her. And I was thinking somebody kind of close by. I was thinking Nina Nunes or Watterson, the karate hottie. I think she would do very well against those strikers. And I think that's what we'll probably see next. I would say we should see next is somebody like that, somebody like a striker like that. Well, at least if you want to favor her, I guess. If you're trying to test her, of course, you would send somebody in who's also a good grappler. But yeah, that's her preferred way up the rankings, I would say. As for Hill, you know, I like her as a person, as a fighter. I do think she's good. I think she's exciting. But I think it's pretty clear that we're not going to see her against anybody that's ranked for a little while at least. So she's probably going to be fighting those unranked people for a little while in the next couple of fights. After that, we saw the two veterans, Michael Johnson, Alain Patrick. Nobody really knew what to expect here. I mean, they're both so unpredictable, and they're both, you know, getting on in their careers. So what were we going to see here? Nobody really knew for sure. Johnson was the one coming in heavy with some big shots, stumbled Patrick more than once, actually, in the first couple minutes. Not to be outdone, though, Patrick did land a bomb of his own, stumbled Johnson into the fence. You know, after that, they kind of went shot for shot. Both landed some big ones in there. And then Johnson found himself on top of Patrick to, I would say, solidify the round there. You know, the extra strikes knocked him down a couple times. And then, of course, the ground game, I think pretty clear, up 1-0 for Johnson there. Patrick, though, came in insane in the second round, throwing haymakers all over the place, but Johnson did manage to avoid all those. And once again, Johnson landed a couple of bombs to stun Patrick. And after a couple more, knocked Patrick on his back, jumped on him, landed some more crazy ground and pound, and actually knocked him out cold with that. So it was Michael Johnson getting the KO in the second round over Alain Patrick. Amazing return for Michael Johnson. And I'm sure everybody else will agree. I can't wait to see him back again. And it'd be very interesting to see what he's going to do next. Like, you know, could be even somebody ranked. We could see that, especially since, you know, with his history against so many ranked people, the veterans of the UFC. Oh my God. Why is Loki being so fucking stupid today? Jesus Christ, it's annoying. Oh my God. Anyway, after that was the second prelim that I had talked about last time. Viviane Araujo and Andrea Lee. Again, we knew this was going to be close, just like every other women's fight. Oh my fucking God, that's annoying. Stop. Seriously, Loki, stop. So I was choosing Lee by decision in this one because she's looked so good recently. So good recently. that I thought the grappling would come in handy, and also her striking too, to the point where I didn't think she was going to run away with it, but I definitely gave her the slight edge. And she also came in younger and with a couple extra inches of reach. So I was giving Lee the slight edge in this one. Both women came in trying to put on a show. Lee landed first, almost finished Araujo with a massive, massive hook into a head kick. I mean, seriously, it looked like it was going to be done there. I don't know how Araujo got out of it, but she did. And she got dropped to the ground, got up, picked Lee up, and slammed her to the ground. Lee did get up pretty quick, and they started throwing out some more combos here and there. But to really steal the momentum on the cards, Araujo took Lee down, landed on top, let loose some of the ground and pound. And yeah, really took the first round like that. In the second round, they both came out pretty heavy once again, landed some big strikes, but Lee made a massive, massive mistake. Shot for Araujo's ankles, let Viviane take her back. And you just don't want to do that to somebody who's that good at jiu-jitsu. Anybody from Brazil, really, you don't really want to do that. Lee managed to avoid the submission attempts, but with all that control time and the ground strikes, all the control, I mean, it was so devastating. It looked like a pretty clear 10-8 in my mind, I thought. Araujo kept her wrestling dominance going into the final round. And I mean, Lee even said it herself. She thought she was going to pass out. She was so tired. Just the cardio, gone after the second round. Awful, awful position to be in for Lee. And then Araujo, of course, used that to land another takedown within the first 30 seconds of the final round. And just kept that wrestling going. Lee did get back up after a few minutes, but she was clearly out of gas there, just way out of it. Lost all power behind her strikes completely and basically just fell to the ground as Viviane got another takedown in at the end there to close off the fight. Started off close with that opening round, but after that, I mean, it was just complete dominance for Araujo and very, very impressive because, I mean, Lee was looking so good going into this. I mean, I really didn't see that coming at all, that Araujo was going to be that good. And I am so impressed. And honestly, pretty disappointed in Lee for multiple reasons. But anyway, I'm surprised that Araujo, I would say, did this well against a tough contender. Lee, especially since Lee looked like she was going to get an early finish there. But like I said, the cardio was the problem, just completely fell apart after that opening round. Araujo did struggle with that explosiveness in that opening round, but after that looked completely unbeatable. With that kind of ground game, especially against somebody that's as dangerous as Lee, there's no doubt to me personally that she'd have a pretty close battle with most of the people above her. I think Grasso would be amazing. Another like crazy good striker. So I think that would be a very, very interesting matchup next. If Grasso doesn't have any bigger plans and wants to keep fighting, keep busy, I think that would be a great matchup. But I would say it's going to be difficult for both of them. And I think that's why, of course, I think that's the one to watch. I think that would be great. Otherwise, I would say actually a matchup against Maya. She's just above her in the rankings this week. So, I could see that being a great fight too. And Maya, I believe, just came off of a loss. I actually can't really remember. I didn't really write it down, but I know she's had a bit of an off and on kind of record. So, Araujo and Maya, I think that would be very interesting as well. So that'd be a good one. Then we had the main card, and this was one of the ones that I made sure to talk about a couple of times because I didn't really understand why Jake Hadley was coming into this as such a huge favorite. Hadley was undefeated. Sure, he had that. But and he did look good on not the Ultimate Fighter. On he did look good on the Contender Series, but I knew how good Nascimento was, and I told everybody this. Nascimento split decision lost. So essentially, basically a toss up with Tagir Ulanbekov, and Ulanbekov basically beat Tim Elliott. So essentially, I know MMA math doesn't really exist, but with that logic, you're basically saying that Nascimento can compete with somebody who's ranked and somebody like Tim Elliott. I'm not saying Nascimento would beat Elliott, but he'd give a pretty good fight. So, I mean, when you're coming in as a UFC newcomer, a rookie, in your first fight, making your debut, and you've only fought, like, your last fight was against a Ultimate Fighter alum. I mean, there's such a huge difference in skill there that to me it was kind of insane to call Hadley. I think he was at minus 300 or something. To me, that was absolutely insane, which is why I said not to go with that. And I said specifically to go with Nascimento on this one. And I was going with him by decision. And I mean, I'm a genius, I guess. No, but seriously, I mean, it just goes to show you that the odds are not everything. You have to seriously look into the research. You have to do your research. And that's why I'm here, folks. And that's why I do all the research that I do, because if I would have just gone by the numbers and said, oh, Hadley's a minus 300 favorite. He's undefeated. You should include him in your parlay. We would have been a completely different story here. But that's why we do the research. Big underdog Nascimento, and he came out with the win here. I mean, it was close. They wasted no time, threw out some wild combos at the start. The first moment of the fight, though, did go to Nascimento. He got Hadley to the ground and really started to grab onto his leg and ankle. Always scary when that happens. You got to cringe when they grab onto the ankle. There were a couple of nasty looking knee bar and heel hook attempts, but Hadley did slip out of all of them. He may have survived, but I mean, Allen clearly dominated the first round with all of that, with all those crazy submission attempts and being on top and all of that. I mean, clear first round. The second round did open up with some more wrestling dominance from Nascimento, and it didn't really seem like Hadley was really in danger of being finished at any point at that stage. But again, so much control, very clearly up 2-0 after 2 on the cards there. And headed into the final round, Hadley did come in hard. Obviously knew that he needed a finish because, I mean, pretty clearly lost the other 2 rounds. Dragged Nascimento to the ground, fought for submission after submission. But, after a couple of transitions, Hadley found himself on the bottom once again. I'm not sure if my dog's being dangerous or not. He's eating something. I might have to check on that. But anyway, for some reason, Allen did let him back up and actually left Hadley to get a takedown of his own. I don't know why he let him up and let him do that, but he did. But he ended up reversing positions and he ended up on top again. I mean, just a wildly dominant decision win. And that is why we do the research, people. Huge, dominant decision win by Nascimento. And I think, if you would have done the research like I did, you would have pretty easily see that one coming. And I mean, you never know. Hadley could have come in and done something crazy, but everything seemed to be pointing towards Nascimento to win this by decision. So you're welcome. You're welcome cashing in on one of the bigger underdogs of the night. After that, it was Frank Camacho, Manuel Torres. They were very even on the odds there, but I made sure to make it clear. And there was that person who also did comment in last time on the stream. We talked about it back and forth, how Torres was clearly the favorite going into this, even though the odds were so close. And I hope, again, that you put some money on Torres here, because we cashed in again fairly big here. Yeah, Camacho had been in the UFC for, I think, 1 or 2 fights there, but oh yeah, he did have losses to fairly impressive people. He lost to Lee, Neal, Dariush, and Dober. But Torres came in. I mean, he looked so good. What was I going to say here? Yeah, in the Contender Series. And he was on a win streak, including that Contender Series, with 3 first-round finishes in a row. And considering Camacho had been finished a few times in the UFC by the same kind of method, it seemed like Torres might be doing the same thing, which is why I even said I was going with Torres by finish on this one. That's how confident I was going into this. And right away, Camacho found himself in trouble. Torres landed a couple of bombs, making him wobble all over the place. Camacho recovered fairly nicely with some big shots of his own, but seemed to still be Torres landing the bigger strikes there. As the round went on, Torres landed bomb after bomb. Made Camacho stumble all over the place, seriously, and finally landed one, dropped him to the ground. At that point, the ref had no choice. He had seen enough and stopped the fight right there. And you really can't ask for much more than that in your debut. TKO in the first round over somebody who has been here for a while, although maybe hasn't necessarily had the most impressive run so far. Still impressive for Manuel Torres there. The next fight was the last women's fight of the night, and it was also a ranked one, a top-ranked Chookagian versus Amanda Ribas, coming up from strawweight. I had to figure out which one she was coming up from. But yeah, Chookagian, number 1 flyweight contender, against Ribas coming up from strawweight. I don't really think most people really expected what was going to happen here. I mean, I thought this was a bit of a strange matchup, to be honest, because Chookagian, is a true flyweight. She cuts down to flyweight. She is big, and she uses that and her skill, of course, to essentially just get a decision over every single person that is not essentially Shevchenko or a number 1 contender like Jessica Andrade. So, I mean, it seemed unlikely that Ribas was going to really be able to do anything, especially considering she came up from strawweight. But I think she shocked everybody and impressed everybody. I did not see it coming, and she did very, very well. There were 2 things that were very obvious right away. I mean, Ribas was way faster. It wasn't even close than Chookagian. While Chookagian was obviously the much longer and much bigger fighter going into this. So even as it started, I was like, okay, yeah, we're still going to be seeing Chookagian kind of walk away through this pretty easily, probably. But in spite of that size difference, Ribas quickly dove in, got an early takedown, smothered Chookagian, working towards a submission there. It took her a couple of minutes, but Katlyn did manage to get back up. Sadly, with all that control time, it seemed like Ribas had won the opening round there. Knowing she likely dropped the first round on the cards, Chookagian came in heavy, threw all kinds of combos at Ribas, knowing that, of course, was her one way of winning this, because that's what she does in every fight. Uses her stand-up to get, and of course, some clinch work to get some to get ahead on the cards there. What was I going to say here? I lost my place. It was all working well until Amanda landed one of the craziest judo throws I've ever seen. Huge judo throw. Found herself on top of Chookagian once again. Just like the first round, she did manage to get back up. But with that much control time, honestly, it was pretty hard to deny the fact that Ribas was likely up 2-0. That's how I saw it at this point, for sure. The final round was looking great for Chookagian. using her striking to keep Ribas at a distance, which is what she was trying to do the whole time. But Ribas still managed to drag her down for a little bit near the end of the fight. The last round was pretty tight, and it could have gone either way. But I mean, like I said, with the first 2 rounds, in my opinion, going to Ribas, I thought she had pretty clearly won the decision. And I was very surprised, like I said, because I really did not expect any of that happening. But I mean, Ribas looked so good. But the judges disagreed. I don't know how, but they disagreed. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't know how, actually, because it was close enough, like I said, that it could have been a toss-up. But I saw it very clearly as Ribas, in my opinion. I don't know. But yeah, we saw Katlyn Chookagian ended up getting the split decision, which was fantastic for our bets. But again, I'm always conflicted, because when I win a bet and I shouldn't, I'm happy that I won the bet, but I'm sad for the state of MMA because, and for Ribas, of course, because I think that she won the fight. So very conflicted as always, but yeah. And I'm not really sure everything that you can, what can you take away from this fight, really? I mean, Ribas defied all expectations, and in my mind, did win this fight, of course, with her wrestling. That tells me that if she wants to, Ribas really can stay up here at flyweight and pretty much beat anybody in the top 5, I would say, pretty easily, to get a quick title shot. I really do fully believe that. Chookagian is still the number 1 contender, but honestly, I mean, you can't say that she did anything at all to deserve that title shot against Shevchenko again, and to convince people that she could beat Shevchenko with that, considering she basically just lost because of Ribas's wrestling, who is a small flyweight compared to, the essentially one, probably maybe even the best women's mixed martial artist of all time in Shevchenko, who thrives on the ground. So, I mean, it just seems silly to give Chookagian a title shot after that. But it would be interesting to give Ribas a title shot. Obviously not after this loss. But like I said, if she can come back and do the same thing and maybe, better, or finish somebody else in the top 5, I think you kind of have to give her a title shot, honestly, because there really isn't anybody else that's doing anything at flyweight. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking for the division there. I'm thinking somebody like Grasso or Murphy or Fioro, who are at the top of the flyweight division. If she does what she just did to those 3, beats them, even finishes them, I would say she should get a pretty easy, pretty quick title shot. That's my opinion. I think that's what's next, personally. And I'm excited too, because I really like Amanda Ribas. She's one of my favorite. She's actually one of my favorite female fighters. So I mean, which is, again, is weird because I was so surprised that she was doing so well. But I do really like her as a person and as a fighter too. So again, very conflicted. I'm always so conflicted here because I'm a fan of a lot of these people, but I have to pick against them because I have to go with the data and the information that I've got. And that's what I had there. Anyway, oh yeah, after that, I was going to say we had the light heavyweights, but it wasn't. It was actually another final fight before we got to those light heavyweights. Louis Smolka and Davy Grant. This is one of the most exciting ones of the night to me that I had going into this. I had Grant going into this by finish because I saw him against Yanez, and he dropped Yanez, from what I remember, who is so good. And I think it was a split decision against Yanez that he lost. So I mean, it was. So it was so close, and he was so good in that. And I mean, he's got KOs all over the place. So I was thinking clear choice here. Grant getting a finish. That's where I was going into this one. Or maybe, of course, getting a pretty decisive pretty dominant decision win there. Could have gone either way, but I was going with the finish here. Grant got the action going early, landed some heavy leg kicks and the combos, of course. But somehow, I don't know how, seriously. I don't know how Smolka lasted as long as he did, really, because he was getting absolutely dismantled the entire fight and still kept walking forward. I mean, he got smoked. I said probably over a dozen times here in the opening round. I mean, it was just absolute. I was blown away that Smolka was still standing, really, because he was getting absolutely drilled here. So, I mean, Smolka tried to get some wrestling going, but Grant shut it down right away and kept his own striking going. So very clear, very clear. Oh, and he did end up dropping him. Grant also did drop him at the end of the first round. So very clear first round goes to Grant. And the second round, Smolka did try to start getting some things going, did stumble Grant a little bit. And after a late mistake from Grant, actually, Smolka found himself in the dominant position on the ground. So I was actually going, I think it was pretty clear, actually. You had to score that 1-1. I mean, you know, Grant obviously ahead in the first round, but with the ground game, Smolka did edge ahead in the second round, in my opinion. Taking the notes from the corner, though, Grant came in and lit up Smolka's legs with some more kicks until he was literally hopping around and could not stand anymore. Fell to the ground, and from there, I mean, Grant literally just jumped in, threw a couple of light shots in to finally finish off Smolka after all of that. And my God, it was just impressive that he even lasted that long. Insane. Absolutely insane that Smolka lasted that long. Third round TKO by Davey Grant. And after that, that is when we saw the light heavyweights. Of course, the first matchup would have been Ryan Spann, Ion Cutelaba. I was going with Cutelaba by finish here, but you know what? Yeah, I don't know, actually. I'm not saying I regret choosing Cutelaba, but there could have been some signs leading up to it that maybe I should have gone with Spann. It was very, very close, though. So yeah, I knew there was going to be a finish either way here. So I went with Cutelaba because Spann hasn't really been doing all that well, and Cutelaba is always just constantly dangerous. Both men let their hands loose early, but it was Spann who landed the clean one first, stumbled Cutelaba into the fence. Using that position, though, Ion did find himself on top, but Spann kept getting back up, but Cutelaba kept taking him down, landing on top. But out of nowhere, though, Spann grabbed onto Ion's neck with a front choke while they were still standing, held on while both of them hit the canvas, some rolling there, and Cutelaba tapped right away, and that was it. Really, the main lesson you could kind of get from this one is that Ion just seems to be a bit too reckless right now, to me personally. I think that's what his problem is, to be against somebody in the top 15, because he's great. He's fantastic against people that aren't as experienced. But when you're so reckless, you know, it's the experience of somebody in the top 15 kind of takes over, and he just doesn't stand too much of a chance after that. You know, like he's dangerous and he has the skill to beat these guys, but he gets too excited and he jumps into situations that he should be avoiding. Spann, on the other hand, I mean, from this clearly cemented himself in the top 15, and you should expect, I would say, for him to get an exciting matchup in his next one. Personally, I'm thinking to bring Johnny Walker into this. It'll test out Spann, and also it'll test out Walker himself. I think it'll be a close matchup, a very interesting matchup, and I'd like to see that next. Finally, in the main event, it was the former champ Jan Blachowicz and Aleksandar Rakic. I was going Blachowicz by finish on this because I mean, seriously, this guy was a champ. I think less than 6 months ago, he was a champ. So, I mean, to completely overlook him and go with somebody like Rakic, who hasn't really had the same caliber of wins at all, while Blachowicz was finishing, he finished Reyes, he finished Corey Anderson. So to me, it seemed kind of insane that Rakic was being favored here. So I was going with Blachowicz. Obviously strange ending to this, and we'll get to that. But it did start off. Rakic was the first one to land, cut Jan open early, but the leg kicks from Blachowicz were huge, were absolutely massive. After getting some quick combos going from both sides, Rakic did try to get some clinch going, but was clipped by a hook from Jan. After a dead even opening round, really, Rakic switched it up, took Jan down, and tried to lay on top of him, which, of course, is what Glover did to win the belt in the first place. And as we knew, Jan didn't necessarily have an answer for that. We knew that he wasn't really going to have an answer for that. But I also knew that Rakic probably wasn't really going to play that game definitely not as much as Glover was going to do that. He did spend almost the entire round on his back or along the fence. Jan looked good, trying to get some good combos in. And then out of absolutely nowhere, seriously, in the third round, Rakic took a misstep and his knee popped out. Possibly, I think they said it may be the ACL or MCL, whatever that ligament is in there. Definitely tore on the ground. Had to stop. The ref had to stop it, of course. Terrible way for Rakic to lose, considering how it was going to, because it seemed like it was going to be going in favor of Rakic. Terrible way for him to lose. And Jan, of course, gets the TKO win in the third round. Not the way that anybody wanted it to end, of course, but I would actually say it was a pretty good showcase for both guys. I mean, Rakic looked crisp, dangerous, fresh, proved that he still obviously deserves to be in the title conversation. And on the other side, Jan showed why he held the title. I think, again, less than 6 months ago. I can't remember the dates, but he just had the title. So to me, he still looks like he could get that title back, possibly, maybe, at least to the point where he deserves the title shot again, probably at some point. What was I going to say here? What's next for the whole division, really? I mean, we're likely going to see Ankalaev fight Smith. That seems to be where that's going. And from there, maybe the winner of that, probably Ankalaev, gets Jan or the title shot. And I messed that up in my notes. And the loser will probably get Rakic, or the loser of the upcoming title fight between Glover and Yuri. That's what I think is next. Regardless, honestly, for the first time in years, it's actually kind of getting slightly interesting and entertaining, possibly, at the top of the light heavyweight division, because let's just say has not been the best division in the past few years. So it's nice to see that something's starting to happen again, especially, of course, with Yuri, who we're going to be seeing against Glover in Singapore there for the belt. I can't wait to see that. That's going to be crazy. I mean, Yuri is a lunatic. Anyway, so the bonuses of the night, KO of the night, Michael Johnson. Whoa. Lots of dogs barking in the hallway. That scared me. The bonus, Michael Johnson for the KO. Sub for Andre Petrosky, of course. And the brawl of the night for me, Louis Smolka, Davey Grant. I mean, it was so crazy. Back and forth there. Super entertaining fight. So I gave the brawl of the night to those two. And the most valuable fighter, I think pretty clearly goes to Michael Johnson. I mean, 35 years old. His record, by the way, 19-17. That's a crazy record to still be in the UFC with. Found himself, of course, on a 4-fight losing streak going into this week against a pretty good veteran, too, Alain Patrick, who had a record of 15-3 going into this. Very impressive. Overcame all of that to get the devastating KO in the second round, possibly reigniting his entire career. Amazing, amazing to see. So, of course, that was my most valuable fighter of the night there. And of course, before we take our break, I will talk quickly about this week's TUF episode, episode 3, The Ultimate Fighter. Who was it? I need to get to my notes here. It was between the flyweights, of course. I just saw it yesterday. I should know. It was Helen Peralta. Oh, actually, no, it was the heavyweights. What am I talking about? That was just my recap, of course. Last week, of course, we saw the flyweights. That was Helen Peralta, Katlyn Neal, which, of course, Team Nunes's Neal barely ended up edging ahead. Personally, I kind of thought Peralta might have won, but it was so close. You know, it was a split decision, and you got to go with Dana, of course. He was the one, I'm assuming, who picked the split decision win there, giving it to Neal. And it was so close. I mean, who knows? Anyway, this episode, though, was between Mohammed Usman, the guy who we've been looking forward to this entire season so far, all 3 episodes of it, against... What can you say about this guy? Crazy trash talker, Mitchell Sipe. And it opened up talking about Usman's story, of course. Yes, brother to Kamaru Usman. Whoopsie daisy. Brother to Usman, of course. And really, it was focusing a lot on the tragic story of his son, Nash, who died a couple years ago, only a few years old. Really, really sad story. So, of course, they focused on that. And he dedicated, really, I guess, this entire season and most of his career, I guess, to, of course, his in memory of his son, which is amazing to see, and so sad, so emotional of the story too. And he showed up very intensely focused and very determined. That was so clear throughout the entire fight week, throughout the entire episode. I was so impressed that he was so focused, so determined, didn't let anything Sipe was saying through to distract him at all. Very intense and focused, and especially in the training. So yeah, very impressive attitude by Usman, and you love to see that. Sipe, obviously the exact opposite of that. Trying to be an instigator, of course, taunted Usman, saying some wild stuff that didn't even really seem true, that he was ducking him on the regional scene, that he canceled a fight from him years ago, which apparently doesn't even seem to be true. So yeah, lots of crazy stuff coming from the Sipe side. He's from Oklahoma, part native, and he actually appeared on one of the first seasons of Dana White's Contender Series back in 2018, where he actually grabbed his first pro loss in that one. Like the first 2 heavyweights of the season, Pauga and Bartling, Usman actually weighed in at a lower weight. Very strange, actually, for the heavyweight division, but 3 of the 4 heavyweights that we've seen so far have been lighter. Usman weighed in at 238, but I will say very much muscle, not really much fat at all. So, I mean, you know, yeah, he could probably weigh in at 250 if he felt like it, but, you know, yeah, you got to keep the fat off, keep the speed going, the cardio going at 238. While Sipe was by far the largest heavyweight so far, weighing in at 265 with quite a bit of flab, let's say. Definitely on the larger side, definitely cut down to 265 to make the weight. And apparently he was even, actually, no, I think that was somebody else. I think I heard somewhere that somebody was weighing in at like the 280 the week before and was cutting down. I wouldn't be surprised if that was Sipe, but I don't think it was in this case. Anyway, on to the fight itself. Using his smaller size, Usman obviously had the speed advantage here, dodged most of Sipe's early strikes. And that's really when the shenanigans started for Sipe. I mean, outrageously overconfident, had his hands down completely, literally fighting like this. And it's like, when you're fighting a heavyweight who is as crisp and clean as Usman, probably not the best idea to do that. But in spite of that, he actually started getting, I would say, by far the most offense going. Maybe he was trying to pull, I think he was obviously trying to pull in Usman by being so open, which didn't really work. Usman wasn't taking the bait at all. But Sipe actually did end up getting a lot of offense off in the opening round. And he actually did even have the first, I got ahead of myself and started rambling without looking at my notes. But he did actually even have the first moment of the fight. First big moment of the fight. He clipped Usman with a huge, huge shot, actually dropped him to the ground and jumped right on him with some ground and pound. And of course, that just excited him more. Turned up the antics to 11, started going crazy, taunted him even more, arms wide open like this. And it's like, who do you think you are, really? I mean, I didn't like that shit at all, personally. And he was talking to Usman's corner too, which is ludicrous considering you're not even doing that well. But anyway, from there though, Usman managed to get Sipe to the ground, landed a couple strikes of his own, definitely stole the momentum, but pretty clear that Sipe won the opening round. I mean, he dropped him with the big shots, definitely got more action out, more striking out. So it seemed pretty clear that Sipe did win the opening round, even though he was being a complete idiot. After grabbing, I don't know. From there, though, Usman, oh no, that is the second thing. Oh my goodness. There we go. The second round, I lost myself in my notes. The second round started a little slower. Neither guy really wanting to make much of a move. But Usman, wow, I'm really fucking myself up now. Slow myself down. But it was pretty clear that Usman still wasn't going to be tricked like that with Sipe getting the shenanigans going. I mean, I don't really know what Sipe was trying to do here, because I know what he was trying to do, but I don't know why he thought that was going to work, considering it was pretty clear that Usman wasn't doing anything to show that anything was affecting him at all. So it seemed a little weird. Again, maybe it was also the strategy trying to get some fans on his side, which I think was wildly backfiring, at least for me, especially because I thought that was a huge turnoff, seeing somebody be such a complete moron when you're barely winning the fight. Especially when somebody like that, crisp and clean, is in front of you like that. One shot is going to end it. So it's kind of insane to be doing that kind of thing, and not insane in a good way. What was I going to say? Funny enough, though, even though Usman was the one edging ahead and landing bigger shots, because Usman was starting to get ahead the later the fight went on, Sipe was still the one taunting. After some advice before the third round, Mitchell opened up with a bunch of leg kicks, tried to slow Usman down, got some more offense going. From there, though, Usman landed another big shot. Once again, Sipe brushed it off, started the showboating. And just as the round was closing, Usman started to push the pace a little bit, got some more decent shots in. And it was probably because of that we saw the decision go the way that it did. I mean, it was so close. Pretty tough to tell, really, who was going to walk away with the win. Ultimately, Griffin and Dana, Forrest Griffin, I should say, and Dana chose Usman, because I'm pretty sure that's who's making these choices, because they don't show any other judges. They just show those two sitting there at the table. So again, I'm assuming that those are the two that are making the choices. They gave Usman the win thanks to that extra bit of activity and those couple big shots. That's what I think happened there. Sipes coach Amanda Nunes did not really seem all that surprised with the decision, because she said this so much throughout the entire fight to Sipe that he needed to stop being, being a goof, taunting on all that. He needed to stop doing all that and focus on actual offense, because Usman was starting to run away with it just because he was being more active and cleaner. And seriously, that's what lost Sipe the fight, is the showboating. And, I got it, I'm making it sound like I hate that kind of thing, but I don't. I love that kind of thing. I enjoy fighters with a personality, one that can taunt their opponents and make a show out of it. That's one of the reasons, of course, that I love Connor so much. I love the Sugar Show so much. I love both of them a lot. I love, who else does that? I'm trying to think. I mean, Pereira, who we're going to be talking about later, kind of does that kind of thing a little bit too. Oh, Kevin Holland, of course. I love that kind of thing. I really do. But you need to know when to turn it on and when to turn it off. And he was not turning it off when it counted, because that's the thing about those other people I just said, is that they can all win. They can all turn it off for a little bit, start winning, and then they can turn back on the shenanigans when they know they can confidently get into that state. And Sipe did not do that. And that is not good. That is not good as a fighter. So I was definitely unimpressed with that. You have to back up the shenanigans with the skill and with the offense. Personally, I'm happy to see Mitchell Sipe leave the show. And I'm even happier, actually, to see Usman open his Ultimate Fighter experience with a win over somebody like Sipe. It's just wildly satisfying. Next week seems a little bit weird. Don't even know if we're going to see a fight, actually. Very strange. Hopefully we'll see it. It's supposed to be Chantel Coates and Brogan Walker. This fight, so much adversity. They teased it a little bit in the episode, but they actually even opened the episode talking about how Chantel Coates from Team Pena actually was weighed in at 150 pounds in the start of, actually, like in this week's episode. So a week before her own fight, and she's weighing in at 150 pounds, trying to drop the weight, but she just can't do it because she had COVID going into this. I'm not into this, obviously, but just before this, she had COVID. And even worse than that, she also had a miscarriage. I think it was just this past year too. So, I mean, all of that combined, just all of that, not just physically, obviously, that's a lot to go through, but mentally as well to go through that. I mean, that's so much to go through. So, I mean, really significant problems cutting weight going into this. So even that alone, we don't know if we're going to see the fight. But also, on the other side with Brogan Walker, turns out she actually hurt her knee while training in the week. Well, that was revealed in the trailer at the end. She hurts her knee training for this fight against Coates. So on both sides, we're not really sure if the fight's even happening. I'm assuming somehow this fight is going to happen, but who knows? Who knows? Seriously, they could cancel the fight, reschedule the fight, maybe do something fun, a challenge between the teams instead. Who knows? I don't know what's going to happen, but that is how the episode ended. That was the trailer that led out of the show, I should say. So very interesting action. We will see. We will see what happens next week on Tuesday, of course, to see what happens with that. But that is my recap, of course, for episode 3 of the show. And before we talk about this week's event, that would be UFC Vegas 55, of course, we're going to take a quick minute break, and I will be back after that, after I sip on some water and y'all watch this minute-long quick ad. See you after this.
Allow me to introduce High Stick Vodka, a new way to celebrate victory. Gather around the glass with an award-winning, ultra-premium Canadian-made vodka. You probably won't listen when I say High Stick Vodka has a smooth, hard-hitting taste, or that it's developed in the birthplace of hockey. You won't listen when I say High Stick Vodka is a tribute to the game of hockey, or when I tell you it's distilled 4 times using Canada's purest mountain spring water to provide an authentic, remarkable flavor. But maybe you will listen when I say it comes in a f***ing hockey stick. Showcase your passion for hockey with our limited edition hand-blown hockey stick bottle. Whether you're celebrating victory or drinking to defeat, High Stick Vodka is better after every shot. Visit us at highstickvodka.com. It also comes in this regular bottle. Celebrate victory. Drink responsibly.
And we're back with this week's action. UFC Vegas 55, Holly Holm versus Katlyn Vieira. We're going to open up, of course, with the main card. That's what we always do. And then, of course, I will talk about a couple of prelims to close out the broadcast. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me again. We're going to open up with Eryk Anders. Excuse me. Wow. Jun Young Park. I have been back and forth on this one, and I gotta say, I don't. There's nobody really listening right now too much, but if there is somebody listening, I have started watching tape for my picks because I'm just so fed up with losing close picks that I have to watch tape now. I've started watching tape. I do it on every single fighter of the card to make my picks, to make sure that, we've got our wins going again, because this is bugging me that I'm losing so much. I can't stand it. So I'm doing everything I can to win more. And originally, without the tape, I was thinking maybe Eryk Anders on this, but I switched my mind after watching the tape. So anyway, 2 impressive middleweights are coming together here. Anders, a little bit up and down in his UFC career, couple of impressive wins like Darren Stewart, Gerald Mearshart, and losses to Lyoto Makita and Thiago Santos. By the way, if you look at that Thiago Santos matchup, obviously Eryk Anders fighting at light heavyweight sometimes. And he has flipped between both of those a couple of times. Jun Young Park doesn't really have that UFC experience with a record of 3-2 so far. But he does have the tight wins over Tefon and Chukwi and Marc-Andre Barriault, and a rough loss, I would say, to Gregory Rodriguez in his last. And that one is very important because it's very reminiscent of this matchup, I should say, is very reminiscent of that fight against Rodriguez. Rodriguez, huge, massive middleweight, basically a light heavyweight himself, like Anders, who had a jiu-jitsu background and heavy punches, also much like Anders. Anders is exactly like that. Not only that, Park had also fought another huge middleweight, Tefon and Chukwi, who has also fought at light heavyweight. So you're seeing a pattern here where he's fighting huge basically light heavyweights down at middleweight, which is exactly what Anders is, and he won that one. What was I going to say here? But Park, normally you would go towards the bigger guy, of course, cutting down. But in both of those scenarios with Nchukwi and Rodriguez, he was doing very, very well. And he did end up winning that one against Nchukwi, probably because of his extra speed and his durability. He is very durable and definitely quicker than the light heavyweights that are coming down. If Park can withstand the power of Nchukwi and do some, because Nchukwi is a huge power puncher, and Anders is not at that level. So he can withstand the power of Nchukwi. And by the way, he gave some pretty big shots. He got hit pretty bad by Rodriguez and withstood most of them. He did end up getting TKO'd, but he withstood most of that to get into the second, I believe, round. And got, like I said, hit pretty bad by Rodriguez. So if he can withstand all of that, I would say he can get through Eryk Anders' power. And because of the ground game, I mean, it's pretty even, but because of that speed and the grappling, I really do think that Park can edge ahead in the decision. So, I mean, I originally had Anders because of that size advantage, but then after I did all the research, the fact that Park has done so well against people like that in the past, who I think are better than Eryk Anders, I think you're going to be seeing a very close decision win by Park. And if you go to the odds, a little bit more in favor than I would have thought. Oh, yeah, that's right. Where's my banner? Banner, please. There it is. If you go over to Bet99, that's where we look at these odds. The odds, Anders at plus 166, and I have Park at minus 209. Like I said, I did have the underdog Anders at plus 166, but considering the matchup, I actually will have to agree that Park is the favorite in this one at minus 209. So that's where I'm going with it. I don't know if I'd be confident enough to put that in a parlay, but at minus 209, considering everything I just said, seems like reasonable to go that way. But again, also not insane to go with Anders at plus 166. Not crazy to do that. And the over under on this one, minus 213 for over 2.5, under 2.5 at plus 162. Considering Park is so durable, I would say the safer way to go with this would be the over 2.5 at minus 213. But if you think Anders might have the power, you could go under. But like I said, considering how well Park stood up to Nchukwi's power and most of Rodriguez's power, I would say he should be able to last until the final bell there. So I would say that is the way to go with this. Minus 213 at over 2.5. Okay. After that, Polyana Viana, Tabitha Ricci. Again, I wasn't sure about this one. I mean, it's also the women, so you could really go either way. Two young contenders in the strawweight division here. Viana had a rough break with 3 losses in a row, including ones to JJ Aldrich and Hannah Cyphers. Since then, though, she did turn it around with 2 dominant first-round arm bars. Ricci is young in her MMA career, but has done very, very well with a 6-1 record and a couple of wins at 115. And her lone loss came to Manuel Fiorot, which, by the way, was at 125. So maybe a mistake to move up to 125 there, but showed that she's fully game to do that. But that was her only loss. By the way, Fiorot is essentially a 135er. So, I mean, we basically saw a strawweight fight against a bantamweight. So, I mean, you know, what could you kind of expect to happen out of that? But she still did not get finished there. She still did enough to get to the end of that. But of course, she did lose eventually. Yeah, so what do we see in this here? I mean, Viana has a substantial reach advantage, but Ricci is so short that she's actually quite used to being at a disadvantage here. And like I said, she went against Fiorot, who is a huge flyweight, and has an incredible reach, bigger than Viana, in fact. So she's very much used to that. So I don't really think that'll play too much of a factor. I do think this is going to be a tight fight for both of them. I think that's pretty clear. But Ricci, I think, actually does have the slight advantage here. She spent almost 2 rounds. Oh, okay. She did get finished by Fiorot. She did spend almost 2 rounds in the cage with Fiorot, who, like I said, is essentially a bantamweight. Already that tells you Viana is not going to be successful in the striking battle. I just can't see that happening, because if Fiorot took 2 rounds to do that, I mean, there's no way that Viana can even come close to doing something like that. They're both skilled on the ground, and a submission could happen at any moment, which is why I'm saying it really could go either way. But with Ricci's aggressiveness, I think she'll be the one to get the ground control time first. I think she'll get the takedown first. She'll get the control time because Viviane likes being on her back. And I think she'll be able to do some damage on the feet as well, because she did okay against Fiorot. So I just think there's a couple of slight things that push it towards Ricci in that case. And the odds are very, very close on this. Viviane plus 105, minus 125 for Ricci. So, I mean, the odds are so close. And with everything I just said, you gotta put it on Ricci, I would say. Yeah. So she is the slight favorite, but again, could really go either way. But with those couple extra edges, I'm giving it to Ricci. Minus 129. Do it. Definitely not in a parlay, though. That would be insane, especially on women's fights, which have not gone our way recently. But with the extra research that I've put in, hopefully that'll start to turn around with the women's fights, especially. Anyway, over under, obviously in favor of the over 2.5 here. Amazingly, actually at minus 167. I would assume that is obviously because of the fact that Viviane has gotten those armbar finishes. But Ricci is good enough that I think she can avoid the armbar. And like I said, use the control time being on top to win the decision. That's what I think is going to happen. So I really do think that we're going to see the final bell here. So minus 167 for over 2.5 is a good way to go on this. Then we've got Chidi and Njokuani making his second appearance of the year against Duško Todorovic, also making his second appearance of the year. And Njokuani made his UFC debut. That was in... Did I write it down? I did not write it down. Oh, I did. February. There it is. In February, he made his debut, got a insane 16-second KO or TKO over Marc-Andre Barriault. Absolutely insane. The power from this guy is on a whole other level, and he is massive for the division. Huge reach, too. I mean, just all around, this guy is a powerhouse. Duško has had a couple more fights in the UFC, has gone 2-2 after his win, like I said, in his last one. Oh, that was actually not this year. That was in December. Maki Pitolo, TKO win. Did not expect him to get a TKO there. So very impressive win in that last one. And before that, lost a decision to Gregory Rodriguez and was absolutely annihilated by Puna Soriano in the first round before that. Now, Duško is talented, but he's struggled against the power punchers because he gets hit too much. He gets hit a lot. So Chidi, being that he's huge for a middleweight, he carries a 6-inch reach advantage into this matchup. I think Duško is going to struggle with that power, and he is likely going to get finished as a result. That's what I'm seeing happening. It also should be said that finishing Barriault that quick is way more impressive than anything Duško has done so far in the UFC. So I'm seeing Njokuani by finish on this one. And if you go to the odds, they're kind of looking in a similar direction. Njokuani minus 225. Duško sitting at plus 180 right now. I think the clear direction to go Njokuani. And you might even want to throw that into a parlay because there's not too many people on this card that are above minus 200. And there's only one that's above minus 300. So when you're doing parlays this time, they're essentially all going to be in the minus 200 range. That's what we're looking at here. And yeah, the over-under on this one, they're clearly seeing that Chidi got that, he's got the extra power, and Todorovic also got that finish, of course. But I think they're more so looking at the fact that Njokuani got that wild TKO in his debut there. So it's minus 163 for over 1.5 rounds and plus 128 for under the 1.5. Honestly, I'm a little bit split on this one. I'm not really sure which way. I would have to probably lean maybe towards the under, only because Njokuani is so powerful. He's got the reach, he's got the skill, he's got the power, and Dushko has been finished by TKO before and struggles against power punchers. So at plus 128, it's worth sprinkling a little bit of money on. That's where I'm going to finally sit on that at the under 1.5 for plus 128, which is great. The co-main event, really the people's main event on this one, Santiago Ponzinibbio and Michel Pereira. The most exciting matchup of the night, I would say by far, like not even really close. This is clearly the most exciting one of the night. Michel Pereira trying to break into the rankings by fighting the 14th ranked Santiago Ponzinibbio. Ponzinibbio has been in the rankings for quite a while. He beat Gunnar Nelson, Mike Perry, Neil Magny to get to this spot. Very impressive. But he hasn't been able to break into the top 10. Lost to Lee, and he had a split decision loss to Jeff Neal in his last fight. Pereira, as we've mentioned a few times on this show, is one of the most unique and creative strikers you'll ever see in the octagon, and that's putting it lightly, to be honest. He only joined the UFC in 2019, and within those 2.5 years has gone, or I guess that's almost 3 years. He's gone 5-2, 5-2 with 4 wins in a row coming into this one. To make the streak even more impressive, they were over some of the most promising unranked contenders in the UFC. That was Chaos Williams, Nico Price, and most recently, Andre Fialho. And honestly, all 3 of those guys could probably be ranked in the 14, kind of 15 range. They're all really in the top 20, except for maybe Chaos Williams after that last loss. But they're both, all of the guys he's faced have been so impressive. Records aside, they are physically identical, really, except for the fact that Pereira is 7 years younger. Ponzinibbio has been around the UFC longer, but with their recent records, they're, I would say, equally as impressive, their records recently, to be honest. And the differences come in how they fight. Like I said, I watched the tape on these two and every other matchup on the entire card for my picks on Tapology. I just don't talk about them all on the show because we don't really have time to do that. And also, people don't really care about smaller names, that just don't necessarily matter yet. Anyway, well, that's what they think. I think everybody matters, and that's why I do all the research anyway. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, Ponzinibbio tends to do poorly when faced with a relentless striker, and that is exactly what Pereira is. He is a relentless striker that only moves forwards and explodes forwards. And Santiago will let people walk him down and start walking backwards. And Pereira does best when people let him do that. So I'm not sure if Pereira will grab a finish here, but I do think it is going to be a very, very long night for Ponzinibbio. Especially when you watch the tape, I really don't think it's going to go that well for Ponzinibbio, I have to say. Now towards the odds, very even, dead even really. Ponzinibbio 100, Pereira plus 125. But seriously, if you saw the tape that I saw, and I saw both of their last 2 or 3 fights, that's what I tend to go for with the tape now. I mean, you'd be hard pressed really to see anything from Ponzinibbio that looks any kind of like dangerous really at all towards Pereira. Whereas Pereira really, he looks so good in this kind of matchup. that minus 125 to me is a complete steal. Definitely jump on that minus 125 betting line. Seriously. Yeah, I think this is going to be a long night for Ponzinibbio. But, he could easily make it close, but I just think he's going to get pieced apart and going to be getting hit by some wild shots that he is not prepared for. The over-under on this one, minus 175 for the over. The under is at plus 137. Ponzinibbio is fairly tough too, so, he can take a shot. I'm not saying he can't take a shot. So, I would say the over is the way to go on this. I do think we're probably going to see a decision. Pereira could get a wild KO, but I think the safer bet is probably the minus 175 for the over 2.5 in the decision there. Excuse me. So that's where I'm going on this one. The next one, the main event, Holly Holm, Katlyn Vieira. I got to admit, before I watched the tape, this was another one. Actually, the co-main was another one too. But this was another one that I wasn't really sold on. I wasn't really sure which way this was going to go because I remember watching Vieira and thinking, wow, she's pretty good. But also you've got Holm, who is just unbelievable in the fact that she's been going this long and is this consistently good and smart as a fighter. So yeah, closing out the night, UFC legend Holly Holm against the young phenom Katlyn Vieira. Holm joined the UFC back in 2015 and has fought pretty much everybody, really. Most notoriously, of course, her crowning achievement, beating Ronda Rousey to become the champ in her first year in the UFC. From there, though, she did lose to UFC legends like Tate, Valentina, and Durandamy, Cyborg, and Nunes. So all losses there, but I mean, come on. Absolute legends. I mean, Valentina, Cyborg, Nunes, that's crazy. That's crazy. And since her most recent loss, which was Nunes in 2016, or no, it doesn't say that. I think it's 2018. I don't remember. I didn't write that part down. But since the most recent loss to Nunes, she's gone on to beat Aldana and Pennington to keep her spot near the top of the rankings there. Vieira only joined in 2016, but since being handed her first loss by Aldana in 2019, she's gone 2-1 with wins over Tate and Eubanks and a close loss to Kunitskaya. Just like the co-main, they are physically identical, but Vieira is much younger, 10 years younger, in fact, being 30 years of age compared to Holmes' 40. As always with matchups between the top women, I mean, this is a tight matchup, and realistically, it maybe could go either way, especially since Holm has not fought for a couple years. But being the professional she is, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference yet. We're teetering on the edge there because she is 40. So I think when you start seeing 42, 43, we could see her start to slow down. But I also think that she's smart enough that she would not take a fight if she knew she was not in a physical place, in a physical place to kind of win the fight. So honestly, I trust her enough, being an intelligent fighter, that she will come into this just as good as she was in her last couple fights. Anyway, that being said, because she is so smart, she is one of the most boring fighters I've ever seen, I would say. I don't like watching her. I don't really even like her all that much. But you got to admit that she is one of the smartest fighters on the roster and makes her fights boring because she shuts down everything that her opponents have if she can. Which, of course, with Nunes was just too much and obviously could not handle that much coming back at her, but still. Vieira did well against Tate in her last because Tate was slow. Again, I watched the tape. Tate was slow. Vieira, yeah, that's kind of why she was winning that one. But even still, Tate managed to keep up with Vieira's output. Even though Tate was slow, she still managed to keep up. It's just that Vieta was landing the harder shots. Just before that, though, she lost in a decision to Kunitskaya because of Jana's clinch along the fence and some questionable judging. Let's say I thought Vieta won that fight. But that aside, she did get clinched up by Jana quite a bit and struggled with a slow striker in Tate. And Holm is the exact opposite of that. She is so quick. She is quick. She moves constantly. And her striking is almost second to none, really, in the division. I mean, like, in terms of output, not necessarily in power, but definitely in output. I don't want to say point fighter, but she is essentially a point fighter and very, very good at it. Again, I'm not taking anything away from Holm, except for the fact that she is definitely not exciting. But yeah, so I think because of that, because she's so much faster than Tate was, and she's got a clinch like Jana, it's just a bad combination for Vieta. And I think Vieta is going to struggle horribly with that kind of matchup. I mean, yes, Vieta could, if she catches up to Holm, she catches her, she might be able to drag her down a little bit. That's kind of her one avenue to win. But I think Holm is so athletic, so quick, so smart that I just can't. I just can't. And by the way, Holm's takedown defense too is very, very good. Like on another level, really, to most people. So I just think there's so much going towards Holm here that I'm going with Holm by decision. And if you look at the odds, they are, again, slightly close because, like I said, nobody is above the 200 range, except for one that we will talk about in a bit here. Holm is at minus 240, Vieta plus 190. I would say you probably got to put Holm in a parlay here because minus 240, not really much to go on an individual bet, but in a parlay, decent, especially considering all the things going in her favor here. The over under, without a doubt, I mean, you're leaning towards the over. Minus 260 for the over 4.5 rounds. The under 4.5 plus 190. I mean, I think we're pretty much guaranteed a decision here. I can't really see. I mean, maybe Vieta could just absolutely shock everybody and get her down somehow against that crazy takedown defense, overcome that and get a submission. I don't know, but I just can't see it happening. I think Holm is going to win the decision fairly clearly here. What was I going to say? Plus the fact, remember, this is a 5-round fight, which Holm is incredible in. She is amazing at 5-round fights. She will last the entire time. Whereas Vieta, I think, will also probably slow down in rounds 3, 4, and 5. So even if Vieta manages to clinch up against Holm in round 1 or 2, rounds 3, 4, and 5, I think Holm is going to just walk away with it, and she's going to get the win like that. That's what I see happening. So that's it for the main card. And before we go, like I said, we've got 2 prelims to talk about this time, and they're both very interesting and have a couple of exciting guys in there. The first one I want to talk about, Chase Hooper. Oh my God, you got to love Chase Hooper. And Felipe Colares. I wasn't sure which way to go in this one. I was so close on this one because Hooper is the heavier guy in this one, being that he's a featherweight, and Colares is moving up to featherweight doing this. So I wasn't sure when I heard about that, but I'll tell you why. I will tell you why I went in a certain direction here. Fan favorite, like I said, Chase Hooper. Going against another dangerous grappler, Colares. Hooper entered the UFC in 2019 with a record of 8-0-1, and he did win his debut. Since then, though, not so great. He's gone 1-2 with losses to Alex Caceres and Steven Peterson. Felipe Colares also entered the UFC with 8 wins and no losses. That's a weird coincidence, but has fought a lot more often, not a lot more, I guess, going 2-3. All 5 of those fights ended in a decision, with a loss to Montel Jackson and a split decision loss to Chris Gutierrez in his last one. It should also be mentioned that half of those were fought at bantamweight, like I said, while all of Hooper's fights in the UFC have been at featherweight. Plus, Hooper does have a 6-inch reach advantage. This matchup is very close, but like I said, I watched the tape and honestly, maybe not as close as you'd think it would be. Except for in one rare circumstance that we may see. You never know. Hooper, still very young, 22 years old, hasn't really been all that impressive since his debut, but he does have that significant size advantage thanks to his weight and reach. On the other side, Colares has been fighting the much tougher competition, as has dragged everyone to a close decision. The biggest difference, though, that I've noticed is Hooper's minimal striking. And I do mean minimal striking ability. I hate to say it because I love the guy, but even in his last fight, his striking has been, I don't want to say horrendous, but definitely not UFC level, I would say. Just not good. Not good at all. And Colares's impressive striking paired with the great jiu-jitsu, because Hooper is amazing, phenomenal on the ground, on his back, but in pretty much every other situation, except for maybe in a clinch, not good. Not good. Whereas Colares is very well-rounded, has pretty good striking, and great jiu-jitsu on the ground. So Hooper does have a chance on the ground, but honestly, if Colares can stay on his feet, or at the very least, if he can stay in top position, I think he'll clearly win the decision. It's going to be close, but thanks to those edges on the feet, like I said, I'm going to have to give the edge to Colares because Hooper tends to want to be on his back, which is not good when you're trying to win a decision. He goes for submissions, and he's great at submissions. But when you're talking about somebody who's also good on the ground, like Colares, and who also has a striking background where Hooper does not, it just really pushes it a lot more towards Colares. So that's what I'm seeing now. The odds also are going towards Colares, but they are pretty close. Hooper plus 150, Colares minus 186. You got to go with Colares on this one, especially with the striking, because I'm not kidding. I mean, Hooper could obviously come in and he could have improved his striking a lot, but he didn't really even fight that long ago, and he hasn't really shown a huge amount of improvement on the feet yet. He's improved a little bit, but just not to that same level, and I just don't think he can compete on that level, especially against somebody, Colares, who went to a split decision with Gutierrez, who, by the way, is one of the best, I would say, one of the better strikers in the featherweight division, because Chris Gutierrez came down to bantamweight to fight Colares. So with all that in mind, I just can't really imagine Hooper getting the win unless he sneaks himself into a position on the ground to get a submission again. Other than that, I just don't think he has a chance. So the over-under, minus 167 for the over 2.5. Under 2.5 plus 130. I will say Hooper is wildly tough, even though he is not great on the feet. So you could definitely see, I would lean more towards the decision, the minus 167, because of that. But if you think Hooper is going to get that submission, or if you think maybe Colares is actually going to get a TKO here, because that's definitely plausible, you could very much go with that under 2.5 at plus 130. Not that crazy to do that. Like I said, even though Hooper's tough, I mean, Colares' striking could be enough to give Hooper his first TKO loss, or his first finish loss. Actually, he's never been finished before, but you could see that here in the striking. The final matchup that I'm going to talk about today, the biggest favorite of the night, it's Jailton Almeida and Parker Porter right now. Excuse me. To me, this is the second most interesting matchup of the night, I think. Excuse me again. I don't know what's happening to me. Right behind the co-main event. Parker Porter, rough start to his UFC journey. First round KO loss to Chris Daukaus, but he did manage to turn it around with 3 straight decision wins over Josh Parisian, Chase Sherman, and Alain Baudot in his last one. Almeida impressed everybody in his UFC debut with a stunning submission win over, and I should say not in the UFC in his debut, but actually to get his contract on the Contender Series. Just unbelievably, he shocked his opponent too, out wrestling and submitting an undefeated Russian wrestler, and threw him around and ended up submitting him. Just unbelievably impressive. That was at light heavyweight though, as was his UFC debut against Danilo Marquez, where he got a TKO and a blue bonus from me. The real talking point of the matchup, obviously, is the size. Porter is one of the bigger heavyweights. I mean, he regularly comes into fight week weighing about 280 or 290, cuts down to 265, of course, to make the weight. So, it's tough to say how Jailton is going to react to that, being that he is a light heavyweight. But, I mean, it's honestly a little bit baffling that Almeida can even make 205 because he is absolutely massive. He is a massive, massive light heavyweight. But I honestly think he'll be able to overcome that pretty easily because he is just so absurdly skilled that, I would be pretty surprised if Porter could make it to the end of this fight without either getting submitted or getting hit by something absolutely massive. I'm not really sure if he could get a TKO over Porter because he's tough, but I could very much see him getting a submission win because Almeida is just so unbelievably good on the ground that I would not be surprised if we see another submission win here, especially within the opening 2 rounds, because Porter is going to start to get tired, being that he is that big, even though he does have great cardio. When you're fighting somebody that much smaller, who's explosive like that, especially when you're probably going to be grappling a lot, you're going to get tired. So I'm going with Almeida by finish here. And this one was the most one-sided one of the night. Minus 600 for Almeida right now. Porter plus 40 or plus 433. The over-under is under 1.5. The over is actually plus 120. And the under is minus 155. I mean, you could definitely go with that minus 155 at the under 1.5. But if you think that Porter is tough enough, he very much might be. Also, the fact that Almeida has to adjust to fighting somebody that's 200, he's probably going to come in at 270 pounds or more, Porter. So to deal with somebody that big in grappling situations, it might take him a little while to get ready. So it's really not that crazy to go with the over 1.5, so then he could get the submission near the end of the second round, maybe into the third. So either way you want to go with that, not insane. But Almeida by finish here. And if you want to even go Almeida by submission on this, that's where I'll be going with it, I'm sure. I can tell you that. And that is it for the card. Take away the banner. That's it for us today. We'll be back next week, of course, and we'll be talking about this week's fights. Also, of course, The Ultimate Fighter, episode 4. And there is actually no UFC next Saturday, but there is Unified MMA, I believe 45, possibly 46. I can't remember the number. But of course, that will be on, I think, Friday. So we won't be talking about that next week. But yeah, so yeah, next week will be slightly shorter. We will be talking about just the Ultimate Fighter and, of course, this week's fights. So a little bit of shorter one next week, which is kind of nice to have a nice little break for me. And if anybody's out there watching the whole thing, it'll be a nice little break to you to not watch me talk for 2 hours, because these have been long episodes, long broadcasts, because we've got to get into it. But anyway, that is it for me. If you want to watch the other sports, I mean, Area 51 has got you covered. I've got all the MMA stuff. And of course, if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, that's where I post my bonuses. That's all below. And the link to Bet99 and also Area 51 is also below. Check that out. I will see you next time after, well, yeah. And also, there's a sign up bonus with Bet99. You can also check that out. That is also in the link below, and it is talked about in the outro here. But yes, I will see you next time. I can't wait to see what happens. Thanks for watching.